So I want to welcome everybody to our latest Tech Showcase webinar. ICEIT really loves putting these on and letting our member companies show their stuff to you guys. So today we've got Melissa Cyrulik. She's back from ACEIT, going to talk about the new release you guys have done of ACEIT 8.0. I'll let Melissa tell you about yourselves, but thanks again to everyone, and chat me if you need anything. Until then, Melissa.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Megan. Hi, as Megan said, my name is Melissa Cyrulik. I am the program manager, or the current program manager for the ACEIT project, which is a partnership between Tecolote and the government to provide specialized cost estimating software to the government support contractors and industry. We released our latest version of the software in June of this year, and we have now gotten it out a little bit into the community. We are starting to get feedback that the government organizations have, some of them have completed their paperwork to get it installed on their IT networks, and we're starting to get feedback from our user base that the software is being installed and that people are starting to use it. So what I wanted to do today was give a little bit of background on the development behind 8.0 and also review some of the highlights of the new software, and then explain how you can start to transition more into learning more about what the new software has to offer. And I'll take about the next 50 minutes or so to go through and share the details, and then answer some questions at the end. I will not be doing a live demonstration today because in the amount of time that we have, it really doesn't allow me to go and flash over into the software and show that. But if you have questions related to that, please let me know. With that, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the meat of the presentation. So when we started looking at the new development for 8.0, and first of all, this is probably the biggest upgrade that we've done to the software in at least the last decade. So it is different than the 7.5 software. And I'll go through and show you some screenshots so you can see some of the differences, and also some of the way that it's building off of our previous software. But our design goals were to look at our three main user bases. These are new model builders, and often those new model builders are also new cost analysts as well. Our experienced users that have been using the tool for many years, and also our model reviewers. We have quite a few people that are looking at models that have been built by somebody else, and it's their job to go in and validate the model and sign off on the approval of it. And that user base has a little bit different set of needs for using the tool. So we wanted to make sure that we were providing capability and features that really supported these three user groups. And as always, one of the niches that we have is that we're cost estimators first, and then we are taking and applying our knowledge to develop software that helps supports cost estimators and analysts with that. And our depth of experience is what I think allows us to put together a product that will really support the cost analysis community. And if I go here, all right. So to design for our user groups, the first thing we decided to do was look at what the main challenges are for our user groups. And for each of those, I've outlined it here. For our new model builders, the challenge is getting started in a new tool. It's learning the modeling basics, and then trying to gain proficiency in the tool as quickly as possible. So we wanted to improve some of the interface elements to allow that proficiency to happen faster, and to allow the new model builder to really understand what they're estimating quickly. For our experienced model builders, the aim of the game here is modeling efficiently. How can we quickly build a model? How can we also quickly build a model that has the complexity that allows us to simulate the scenario that we're trying to estimate and the analysis that we're trying to do? And then we also want to make sure that we're able to manage performance of the model, and that's both in the time it takes to build the model, how quickly the model runs to be able to support the types of questions that our model builders are being asked from the decision makers. And then for the model reviewer, the challenges there are picking up a model, quickly understanding what's going on in the model, reviewing that model for consistency, and then going through and basically putting that validation or stamp of approval on the methods that the user is employing, or the model builder is using to build the model together. When I talk about the new features of ACE, I'm going to do that in the context of these three groups throughout the presentation. Before I get into addressing those couple of groups, I want to give a little bit more background on some of the design and development history and some of the decision points that we had to make. So if you've been a long time ACEIT user, you may recall that back in the mid to late 90s, we put out our first Windows version of the software, which was called ACEIT 3.0. And the basic architecture framework that we had employed in ACEIT 3.0, that is what we had been utilizing and building on up through ACEIT 7.5. And the challenge of that is that in many places we had reached the end of the line of with that platform of the things that we could employ that many would consider to be modern features. And just as an example, things like being able to drag and drop rows from one place to another. We had a series of things like that over the years people have been asking us to add into the software, and we had that limitation of the platform that we were using. So in order to get to the next level, we really had to go in and we had to update the COTS products that we're using in the background for the interface. And that's hence the reason that 8.0 is probably the biggest upgrade that we've done in quite some time. In addition to the basic architecture framework, we also had file format. We last did a big update to the file format with 7.0 in about 2006. And in order to really add in some of the features that our ACEIT working group, which is a group of government participants that provide us guidance on the things that they've been asking us to get to in the last little bit, over the last several years that we've had to defer, we haven't employed those yet. So with that as the background, because we're making such a big set of upgrades to the software, one of the things that we had to look at here was a decision about whether or not we would have backwards compatibility to our previous versions of our software. And that is one area where we had to, in order to be able to provide things like cell level documentation instead of row documentation, which I'll show a little bit later, and to be able to add some of the drag and drop kinds of capabilities, we've had to move forward into utilizing the base file format that we had and making a step forward. For that reason, as I said, the software is not backwards compatible to 8.0, and as you would with any software upgrade, you should take a copy of the file and save that before you upgrade into 8.0, and then once you're in 8.0, you'll be able to utilize the file going forward. But if you take nothing away from the presentation today, please make sure you have that backup copy. That will save you time and effort. Okay, The ACEIT release, ACEIT 8.0 release summary. The vast majority of the updates we did for ACEIT 8.0 were in the ACE area. And in fact, I'm going to spend the rest of the presentation talking about the ACE upgrades. We did also do a set of upgrades to COSTAT that were mostly in the area of adding some statistical analysis, additional statistical analysis measures to our reporting. In our post tool, we made sure that that is compatible with our new file format, which is a .ACEX. So when you look at ACE files in File Manager, they'll now be called .ACEX files. That's how you recognize an 8.0 file compared to a previous version. And then we also have been working on some calculation engine improvements to JAX. We actually had released those before in a hot fix for the people that utilize that tool, and and that is included with the 8.0 full distribution. One of the things that was removed from the software is one of the integrated tools was called the Automated Cost Estimator and Database, or ACDD. That tool has now, at the request of the government, has moved into the Army's JIAT tool, the Joint Integrated and Analysis tool. So ACDB has not gone away, it's just moved to a web-based platform, which is more appropriate for building databases. So as I said, 8.0 is a complete rebuild, and complete on the interface. I would say on the calculation engine, we were able to reuse quite a bit of engine code and then build from there for the new features that we're adding. But the new platform, it basically opened up this potential for us to provide a lot of interface improvements that we have not been able to do in the last several upgrades. If you're into software and what software we build our software in, that information is here up on the screen. What I think one of the opportunities that going in this direction of having this big leap to the new software, it provided an opportunity to go in and relook at some of the features and capability that we've been providing over the years and do some redesign in some areas. So there are a set of features that we are just continuing to offer from our previous versions, where there's a set of features where we're adding like a new capability set, and then there's also a set of completely new features that we're providing to this. The information broken out in that format is provided in our release notes, and I'll talk a little bit more about release notes towards the end of the presentation. But that just gives you an idea of the depth of the amount of changes that we have with 8.0. So going back to the three different user groups that I had, the new users, the experienced users, and the reviewers, I'm going to go and show a little bit about our workspace first. And some of the things that we've done to improve that, and then we'll talk about the features specific to those user groups. So up on the screen right now, I have what ACE 8.7.5 looks like, and what ACE 8.0 looks like when you strip back some of the additional what we call panes or viewable areas or workspace areas once you strip them back. So you can, if you have already opened up 8.0, there are more panels that come up on the screen. And what I first wanted to show is that if you take those panels away, 8.0 looks almost identical to what 7.5 is. And what we're doing with 8.0 is providing a different workspace view so you can see and interact with the information that's in the model in a different way, and in a way that allows you to have more on the screen at one time, and also in a way that allows you to eliminate some of the scrolling up and down within the row interface that users have had to do over the years, and also minimizes the number of pop-up dialogues that we have. So with that, I'm going to show the new workspace, which is allowing us to see more of the model. There are the three main areas are what we call our Session Explorer, which is over here on the left panel, where you can see the work breakdown structure, our input variables, and then a series of other types of data are listed here. I'll talk more about those later. And then our main pane area, which has our work screen looking, or what we now call our input sheet area, along with an input form area, and our results, our overrides, and our charts. And then finally, a content pane that's at the bottom, which allows us to, for wherever our cursor is within the input sheet, the input form, it allows us to see more content associated with that element. Here I'm showing our documentation pane, so I can see the documentation that is associated with the WBS CES for row 5 on the same area. So talking about those three panes in just a little bit more detail, the idea with the Session Explorer is it's really about helping you navigate through the model. ACE models tend to have 5,000, 1,500, 10,000 rows. Scrolling up and down through that row, those sets of rows can often be difficult. With the Session Explorer, you can expand and contract and move to any row within the work breakdown structure and any of the input variable rows as well. And then it also allowed us to bring in some elements that were previously more hidden to the user. Things like the milestone profiles that can be used with the milestone phasing methods, also our custom CDFs, or their cumulative distribution functions that are custom risk distributions. We can now see those without having to be on a certain row within the model in order to access that area. And then we've also added a new feature here called data tables, which allows us to store data tables independently from the rows that are in the session, which allows us to speed up some of the calculation. And I'll talk a little bit about those more a little bit later. In addition to being able to better navigate the WBS, we are also have incorporated our Traceback Navigator feature. It's now an option within the Session Explorer panel. So if you look here at the bottom, there's an estimate mode, which is our normal way of working with the model, and then the Traceback mode, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. With our main pane, the main pane is the main area that gives you access to the inputs and the results of your model. There are two input panes. We have an input form that is very much like our old input all form. And then also our input sheets, which is like the work screens that we had in 7.5. On the results side, we are breaking that into three areas. There's the basic results that gives us our BY, TY, or base year, then year risk results. An overrides area, which allows us to do overrides for what-if cases, and then being able to produce the charts. Previously, the charts was something that was added. In order to get to those, it was a pop-up dialog that came up. It's now incorporated into this flat main pane. And then finally, the content panes. The content panes are really designed to give you more detail or visibility into what's going on either in a specific row that you have highlighted within the input form, or with looking at something that's associated with the overall session. So for example, there is a cases pane now that is where all of the what-if cases that are in the model are stored. We also have documentation and visualization panes. Those are associated with the row that you're on in either the input form or the input sheet. So this particular visual is showing me what the phasing looks like for the inputs on the row that we have highlighted in the main pane. So now that you have those couple of panes, the context of those, now I'd like to go in and talk about how 8.0 is helping the different user groups that I introduced at the beginning of the presentation. Okay, the first group that we'll talk about is our new users. The new users, they have the challenge of not only often learning how to use ACE, but they're also learning how to be cost estimators at the same time. And so what we want to make sure is we're helping those analysts learn sound practices and ensure that they are applying the methods properly. To help with that, and also get started quickly in the model. So to help with that, we've redesigned our new session work screen. If you have worked with the tool before, when you created a new session, you would enter in a series of things like the fiscal year and units, the base year that you wanted to calculate in. You also had an opportunity to select what work breakdown structure you had, but usually after you created the model, you had to go back to our session properties in order to assign the inflation table that you wanted to use for calculating the session. To minimize that kind of back and forth processing, we have redesigned our new session screen to allow you to really have all the things that you need to really set up the session properly and then go directly into building the model. We've also have incorporated the new Mill Standard 881D templates in ACE as well as part of the update. To create, one of the big challenges for the new users is really creating a new estimate and learning. One of the things I think that makes ACE unique is our phasing methods, that we have the ability to be able to choose from periodic equations calculating every year, taking a total and spreading it over a date range using a beta curve, a trapezoid, which gives you a ramp up, a steady state, and a ramp down, and a learning curves, and also putting in time-phased throughputs. One of the challenges that the new user had to use was they had to learn when they wanted to specify a certain kind of method, they had to learn which phasing method applied to it. We've updated the input forms to basically help you get to what's the appropriate phasing method without the user really having to know that they're learning that. So the way that works is when you go to a new row, the lowest child, in the input form, you select from one of these 4 main groups. All of the phasing methods are associated with one of these 4 main groups. Once you make that selection, it will take you to the next step, which will allow you to provide the next set of information that you would need to pick the appropriate phasing method. So here in the background here, you can see that I've picked one of the periodic methods, which is basically the F phasing method. Then the user then has is guided through the interface here to enter in their equation, put in a start date and a finish date if that's applicable, assign an appropriation, and so on. In addition to that, one of the things that we've added in this input form is being able to add variables on the fly. With the software in 7.5, the user often had to go down to the input variables section in order to create the input variables first, and then go up to the equations within the work breakdown structure and reference the inputs that they created. And often that meant scrolling up and down between the WBS section and the input variable section of the estimate. To eliminate that, what we've done is we've created this new variables on the fly feature where the analyst will create the variable name that they'd like to use. Then they specify the type of variable it is. So if it's a cost variable, then what the variable will be set up with a appropriation, fiscal year, and units to be filled out. If it's a date, it will know that it needs to be formatted properly as a date. But by making that selection, we're helping the user make sure that they specify that variable correctly for that type. Once you select the type, then it will say, where in the model do you want us to put that new variable? So it's essentially going down into the input variable section and the sections of models, and it's grouping the model, the variables, and you have control over what you want those sections to be called in the session options, and they can also be created on the fly. This allows us to be able to have the equation up at the top, and then the references using those content panes. We can see all of the variables that are associated with the row that I'm on. Here, it's my basic structure. So here I can see that I have a basic structure T1 variable with a value assigned to it. I'm using a ratio to calculate, and a start date and finish date to spread that variable using a beta curve in this case. But this arrangement now eliminates the scrolling up and down between your WBS and your inputs to see everything that's going on in this row from a variable standpoint. To better help understand the numbers that we're entering into the different phasing methods, we've added what we're calling our visualization content pane. This is providing a visualization for the inputs that we have entered into the model. In this case, they've been entered in the input form, and we're entering here our percent spent, our percent time, and our peakness. And it gives us a visual of what that looks like. And then as the analyst, I can go and look at that and say, does that visual match with what I think the phasing should be for this element? If not, I can then go, and this is an interactive dialogue now, where I can go and move the triangle here to the left or right to reshape it, and then it will provide the values that it needs to simulate the new visualization that I've added. We're doing that for both the spread total phasing methods and all of our risk uncertainty distributions as well. So that's helping the user understand more what those values are that you're entering in the tool. We've also made some significant changes to the documentation. The documentation used to be associated with a row. We have now upgraded that so that it's now associated with individual cells. This is something that has been, we've gotten feedback on this for many years. We had not been able to crack that nut until we looked at using a different platform, expanding the platform that we're using. So here I'm showing the content panes. This is an area where the content panes are being utilized heavily. The cell that I have highlighted, any cells that have documentation already entered on them, they will have a red triangle in the upper right-hand corner denoting that a documentation has been entered. And then when you highlight the cell, you can come down to the documentation pane and utilize this drop down here to either see to see what column that documentation is associated with. You can also type directly into this pane. You can add tables here. You can add pictures if you'd like. You don't have to go and open up another pane, and then you used to have to flip back and forth between the documentation editor and the screen. Now you can see the model, what the numbers are within either the input sheet or the input form, and write your documentation right within that view. Next, we've added, we've modified the way that we're able to handle what-if cases. This is something that new users would need to understand, that when they create their model, they can go in and create cases. Those cases may represent variations in the inputs that are associated with all of the inputs that they've created. The way that our content panes work now is we have one cases pane that stores all of the cases that you have in the model. You can create new cases from this pane, and the case that's highlighted within this pane is what's going to be shown in the results, the overrides, and the chart area. So here I can see my point estimate case, either looking at the tabular results or the charts. So those are some of the new things that we've added, focusing on new users, but of course they're relevant to all the user types. Talking more specifically about the new features that we've added to try to help experienced users. Experienced users are model builders that have been using ACE for a while. Often their goal is to produce quality estimates, and then also to get more productive in building models. One of the key things that we've added with 8.0 is now the ability to be able to utilize multiple monitors in your at your desk in your workspace. Here I'm showing two monitors, but you can also do it with 3 monitors if you'd like. There are 2 aspects of this. The first is that you can now take the arrangement that we have, the different panes that I had showed, the Session Explorer, the main pane. I actually can open a second main pane and put that on another monitor. I can put my content pane on my second monitor. I can also change the size of each of these. The arrangement that you can have is completely customizable for how you as the user want to set up and work with the tool. In addition to that, we have also solved the problem that we've had for many years, which is having multiple instances of ACE open at the same time. Previously, you could open multiple models, but they would be open in the same instance of ACE, and you had to toggle back and forth between the different models. Now you can have multiple instances of ACE. You can show one model on one monitor and one model on another model, and visually compare the results, just like you can with Excel. In addition to utilizing multiple monitors, we've also added a bunch of capability to basically promote efficiency. Easier ways to get data into the tool. For example, you can now edit directly into the equation throughput column and work with the functions and have the functions be built directly in the input equation cell, as well as the formula bar. Before, you could only get the functions to come up and do autocomplete within the formula bar. So we've added that to the input sheet area. Dragging and dropping between panes, I can take a row that's in my Session Explorer that I want to be be tagged as a favorite row. I can bring that down to my favorite row content, my favorites content pane. I can also go and view information on the input sheet and in the references simultaneously. We've also added the ability to be able to arrange the panes differently and put in a different zoom. And we've upgraded the amount of information that's available in the right-click menus as well. So all those features will allow you to be able to enter data more quickly, copy and paste information from one place in the model to others, and basically allow you to build a model more efficiently. We've added 2 new phasing methods with this version of ACE. We have a new Weibull phasing method and a Rayleigh phasing method. There's a shape and a percent spent at finish set of parameters. This is an area where you can see where the visualization pane can help you really start to understand what the inputs are for these new phasing methods here. Here I can enter in the shape information, the percent spent, and it shows me what that shape of that curve looks like. So the Weibull, which we tend to use for software estimating or estimating software development efforts or other logistics type elements, usually in the R&D phase. But we can simulate the idea of having a large amount of money to start and then a decrease over time. And if you want to change that shape, you can utilize, you can move the shape along, and you can also change the parameters here and then see what that is looking like to better understand that phasing method before you calculate in the session. In the past, we've had what were called dynamic equation columns, and we had category columns. Those were two separate types of columns that you could add to the session. We've combined them now into what's called custom columns. This is one of the areas where, when we went back and relooked at how things had evolved in the software over years, it actually made sense to only really have one set of custom columns that could be added to the model. And by just adding one type, we were able to merge the category columns that were text columns with the decks, which allowed us to do calculation columns and store dates and have comments. We could combine those into to one set of columns. When your 7.5 file gets converted to 8.0, that conversion will happen automatically. One of the other things that we've added to the Session Explorer is making some data elements that were more hidden, more visible. These examples of these are with our milestone phasing profiles and our risk CDFs. So you can now see those data elements or access them by the Session Explorer areas. These show up as folders within the Session Explorer. They are not rows within the session. You'll see that they do not have a row number in front of them, but they are content that is stored within the model that you can access to utilize in other rows of the session. In addition to the milestone phasing profiles and the risk CDFs, we've added a new element, which is called our new data tables. This allows you to store a data table in the session and not have it be stored in rows. If you're familiar with matrices or any other table setups in ACEIT 8.0 or previous versions, what you had to do is you had to use the fiscal year or the yearly phasing columns in order to store data that you could then reference using functions or some of the matrix functions as well. The issue or the thing that people had to work through is that some tables of data that you have are not applicable to the fiscal year columns. So we were essentially using that as a storage mechanism, but the data that was there had nothing to do with the fiscal year that it was in. By adding data tables, what we're able to do is take that information out of the rows of the session, which means that it doesn't have to calculate those rows when it goes through the calculation process. So we can be a little bit more efficient in our calculation with this type of utilizing this as part of the model architecture. And then it also allows us to do truly what we call an FY independent table. Here I've got an example where I have my pay rates for my E's 1 through 9, and I have their pay broken out by average pay, their composite rate, and then their billable rates. And then I can utilize functions to pull results out of the different columns of this table when I do calculations within my model. And you reference these with the unique IDs and the matrix equations when you utilize them. To promote efficiency, over the last several versions in the 7 series, so 7.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we had been working to employ techniques to be able to make the model calculate faster. There were some models that were, 10,000 rows, 75 years. Some of those models took, an hour plus to calculate. And over the years, we had employed things like multi-threading or using the quad processor to speed up the calculation. We basically had maxed out that approach to trying to make things calculate faster. So what we did was we decided to approach it differently. When we look back at how people were calculating models, what was happening is people would make 1 or 2 small changes to the model, like they have a 5,000 row model, they're making an input change to one row in the model, and that might ripple to maybe a couple of other rows and then the parents that are associated with those rows. But we were still, you make those couple of small tweaks, and when you calculate, you were still calculating the entire model every time. What we decided to do was look at a way of only calculating the parts of the model that had actually changed. So we call this feature our incremental calculation feature. What it does is, as you're working in the model, you make changes, you press calculate, it's going to go and just calculate the things that were associated with the change that you made. And then each one, successively as you make more changes. If you want to calc with risk, you need to actually go and you have to do a full calculation. So that, in other words, the risk is not part of the incremental calculation. But what this does is it saves the time of between changes, of having to wait for the model to calculate it for a longer period of time, and allow you to make these small changes, calculate quick, make sure that the modeling, it passes the syntax check, and that the calculation is working. And then you can do a series of those at the end. If you'd like to do a full calculate, you can. And we offer that feature, but the full calculate, we've done the successive testing to make sure that calculation is working properly. But that should help with the amount of time it takes you to make changes to the model. Managing documentation, we've added a few features to help with managing documentation. We had a feature before that was associated with what we call knowledge or definition keywords, where it would show you all the places in the model that definition was using. This is a different take on that, where now we can see all of the definitions that are associated with the cells, not just the rows of the model. We can see all those, we can get previews, we can add the attached documents here, or you can actually use the documentation pane to do that as well. But the managed documentation allows you to kind of look across all of the definitions that are in the file in one view. We've also added, we've revised the reporting capability. Before, you had to create a report template and then run that template to view the report through our report editor. Here, with this new arrangement, we're allowed, we have the additive advantage of being able to see the report and in the report viewer and all of the report settings right next to each other, so you can update the settings, press press the refresh button and then see the report being updated right next to that. You can then take this report, you can save it, you can export it to Excel or a PDF file as well, and allow you to do that quickly. In addition to that, we've added even the next step of documentation to really allow you to have full dynamic control of all of the data elements that you have within the model. You can organize what data you'd like to have in different rows and the different columns to build your own truly custom tables. Those tables can then be added into your documents to help report on the model. For our reviewers, a couple of areas to help reviewers understand models quickly and be able to validate them. In our file menu, if you go under our info area, it gives a series of metrics on the session, how many rows are in it, how many years are in it, the number of cases that it has, understanding what's going on in some of the rows, what the documentation file size is, if there's any attached documents. I can then also go and review documentation. It gives me a summary of the documentation that's in the model, and then also allows me to go through and look at all the documentation similar to the managed documents that I just showed it with reference to the experienced user. To help with auditing the model, we have revised the Traceback feature that we had. It's now incorporated into our Session Explorer. So when you're looking at a model, you can view it in either estimate mode or traceback mode. The traceback mode, what it does is underneath the WVS row expansion, in rows that are grayed out with these little links underneath it, that is depicting the link or the structure that's going back through the model of where those inputs and those references are. And what this provides is that full predecessor trail to go all the way back to the root input. So here I can see I'm not just getting one level of the successors that are feeding into the row that I'm looking at. I can go all the way back to the lowest level of the element and see that here. In the old Traceback, you had to peel the onion. You had to go and look one step back, then another step back, and another step back. Here, we're showing you all the steps back with this expansion of these linked rows within the viewer. And that should help the user, the reviewer, quickly understand how complex the model is. If you've got, if there's only one thing underneath your Traceback, then it's a relatively simple one-to-one relationship. But if you've got a web of things connected, you'll see a lot more detail in the hierarchy here within the inputs feeding into that row. And then you can, to get even more power out of this, if you run the model with the successors pane and the references pane, that will allow you to see more of the rows and how they interact together in the view. As before, I showed a little bit of the results before, but just to reiterate, in our main pane, you can see the results, both the phase cost route results, BY/TY results, and then also the risk statistics results, which is key to a reviewer to be able to understand the different cases that they have in the model and the results associated with each of those. To review the model for consistency, we also have the reports here. I'm just showing an example of our narrative reports in the view before I showed one of our time phase reports in the view. Again, you can update the report settings and click refresh, and then you'll see the report here, and you can print that or export that. And we're also offering a series of charts within the main pane, we took all of the charts that we had in ACE previously. We've added a couple new ones as well in the analysis report area to give you things like these contributors chart to look at uncertainty results. In the last couple of slides here, I just want to show a couple of things that we've updated and been working to help people understand how to utilize ACEIT in general. We've updated our architecture slide. Here you can start to see what kind of data can be utilized in COSTAT. So if you use COSTAT as our statistical analysis package, that can take in cost data, schedule data, tech data, also programmatic data. You can utilize that to build your cost estimating relationships, your equations, or your other other analyses like your risk analyses, bring those into ACE. You can pull in data from our plugins. That data can come from Excel, other ACE models or project, bring that data into the ACE environment, and then we can take the results and push them out to either in chart form or tabular report form. We can push that out into PowerPoint. We can also go out into our post environment, which really allows us to build charts from multiple ACE models. So if we want to compare the results from 2 ACE models in one chart, we need Post to do that. Post also has a dynamic feature that allows you to go and create a series of charts, push them out to PowerPoint, and then if something changes in the ACE model, you can update the ACE model, press a button, update your Post charts, press a button, and it will automatically update all of the images created by Post in your PowerPoint file. It's a pretty dynamic area. And then, of course, JAX is our cost and schedule tool, where you can take in the cost estimate information and the schedule and do a schedule risk analysis or a joint cost and schedule analysis. As far as the education of helping to transition yourself or your organization from 7.5 to 8.0, we're offering a series of resources to help you do that. The 2 main things that I recommend that you look at are, first, our transitioning flyer. This is available on our website. You can download it off of ACEIT.com. What we've done with this flyer is side by side shown what something looked like in 7.5 and what it now looks like in 8.0. That will help you make quick references to what you know in the software in 7.5 to help you see where that is in 8.0. And then we also have a set of release notes. The release notes, as I mentioned earlier on, it breaks out what really are the new features of the software, where we've updated or modified the approach that we're using, and then things that were maintained are outlined in that document. That's also available on the downloads page for 8.0. The help text has been completely updated for 8.0 to go with the software. We're doing things like webinars like the one that we're doing today. We also offer a monthly newsletter. If you are not signed up for that, if you go to the ACEIT website, you can sign up to get a copy of that. It's distributed via email once a month. And then we're also working to put together a new online help content area on our website. This will have more how-to style articles. We'll be highlighting those in some of our newsletters. That's something that I expect to come online later this fall. We also have our help desk at ACEIT_support@Tecolote.com, where we have analyst representatives that can help you with questions about the software. And then finally, we have updated all of our training classes to the new software. If you've come to our classes before, we have this is a completely new class, a new work breakdown structure where we walk you through the basics of building models, reviewing models. So we've updated our training classes to ACEIT for model builders, ACEIT for reviewers with a 2-day class that just shows the reviewer elements, ACEIT for advanced model builders. We have a COSTAT class and a JAX class. If you go to our website, you can find out more information about those classes. And with that, if you have any questions about, I'll take questions here in a second, Megan, and then if you have any questions about the software, please reach out to ACEIT support or the phone number here that we have here, and we'd be happy to answer any of your questions about the new software. With that, Megan, thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate ICEA continuing to do these tech webinars. Are there any questions from people?
I have to say you did such a good job that all the questions have been, can you send me the PowerPoint?
So I will post the PowerPoint up on our website in the next couple of weeks. This is the main one that we're using to start to talk to people. I have one more presentation that I'd like to do before I'm willing to release the PowerPoint, but please go to our website in the next couple of weeks and you'll see it available there. And I'll let Megan know when it's up as well. If
Melissa, I would like to also post it on our website, and we have recorded today.
Yep, great.
So we'll put it up on the ICEA site, and it'll be on the ICEA YouTube page. I just got a question, and I feel comfortable actually asking it myself. Sometimes they're really complicated. Jeffrey Bowles asks if you can link multiple ACEIT estimates in 8.0.
So the way that, so it's not exactly an active link, but what we can do, we have a feature called our ACE to ACE plugins. What that allows you to do is to select rows that are some of the rows from one model as results and push them into another ACE model so that they can be used to calculate in the equations of the other ACE model. We do not do an active link because we don't want to deal with having the links get broken. But once you use that plugin and you set up the arrangement of what rows from one model should go into the other, you can actively update the data, rerun the export to update the data again. But you can do that with our ACE to ACE plugin.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I'm going to give everybody just a couple more seconds to jump in. Well, all right. Everybody has Melissa's email address. It's up here on the screen, right? And, as well as ACEIT support, we'll have these.
Support. If everybody that works for ACEIT support, they're part of my team, so they will either get it to me or they will answer the question for you.
Oh, okay. We did get one more. Any impact, this is from Bill Barfield, any impact to distribution and loading of annual inflation indices?
Well, we're still doing if I understand the question correctly, we're still distributing the inflation tables the way that we were before. So you can go on our website, you can download the new table. You can either run it as an executable, or we also offer it as a custom inflation table because we know that some organizations have trouble running executables on their software. So we haven't changed the way that inflation tables are getting updated, if that's what the question that's being asked.
Okay. Since we are, normally I would unmute, but we are getting pretty close to the end, so we'll, I think we should wrap it up, let everybody have a moment before they have to get back to their work days. Thank you, Melissa. It's always a pleasure to work with you, and ICEA is happy that ACEIT continues to participate in this program as well.
And thank you for everybody who took the time to join us today. I hope I was able to answer some of your questions about the new software.
And we will, as we just mentioned,